Russia has been increasing its influence in Burkina Faso, where disillusionment with French politics has left a void. Russia has been doing this by sending military specialists, supplying food, and providing the country with ammunition. They have been doing much more than this, and it is now clear to many that they won't stop anytime soon. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia will increase the number of military instructors in Burkina Faso during his visit in June. Russia intends to supply Burkina Faso with military products to strengthen the country's defense capability. Bear in mind that this was Lavrov's first visit to the West African nation. Burkina Faso's foreign minister, Karamoko Jean-Marie Traore, hosted his Russian counterpart. In his opening remarks at the talks with Minister Traore, Lavrov praised the rapidly improving relations that he ascribed to agreements made at the Second Russia-Africa Summit last year. He expressed gratitude for Burkina Faso's objective and fair stance on the conflict in Ukraine. He said they were prepared to lend their support to Africans fighting for their right to be free of neo-colonial control. Lavrov was grateful for what he called an efficient assistance in finding solutions that helped Russia reopen its embassy in Ouagadougou. Note that the embassy reopened last year after 31 years of closure. Plans to reopen the embassy were revealed by Russian President Vladimir Putin during the July Russia-Africa Conference in St. Petersburg. The reopening of the Russian embassy in Burkina Faso signified a renewed commitment to diplomatic engagement and cooperation between the two nations. It provides a platform for enhancing political, economic, and cultural ties between Russia and Burkina Faso. While aligning with military regimes in Africa hardly enhances Russia's power over the long term, it is certainly useful for unnerving countries including the United States, France, and some of the Sahel's neighbors. U.S. officials have warned for years now that both Russia and China are working to build influence in Africa. In 2019, the former head of U.S. Africa Command, Jen Thomas Waldhauser, also said that Russia was using mercenaries and arms sales to gain access to natural resources in Africa. Since a military coup in 2022, Burkina Faso has served as a base for Wagner mercenary forces, whose founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, perished in a plane crash in August of last year. So far in 2024, hundreds of civilians have already been terminated in attacks this year, including around 170 in 3 villages in March and approximately 30 in separate mosque and church attacks in February. Note that Burkina Faso has topped the list of the world's biggest neglected crises for the second year in a row, according to the Norwegian Refugee Council. In 2024, over 6.3 million people in the country will need humanitarian assistance, with over 2 million internally displaced already. Countries across the Sahel, a region stretching from Senegal to the Red Sea, have turned toward Russia for security assistance in recent years in the face of growing regional instability. Russian mercenaries, for example, have supported the Burkina Faso and Malian armed forces in their fight against insurgent groups. Now, Russia is doubling down its focus on the region by tightening its hold over several Sahel states and looking for new partners further afield, a strategy that could pit it against other world powers. The next battleground may well be the coastal West African states. In exchange for strategic access to the Atlantic Ocean, Russia appears to be interested in negotiating military, political, and commercial agreements with the leaders of the West African countries. This strategy mirrors how the U.S. military base in Djibouti, Camp Lemonnier, provides the U.S. some access and control in the Persian Gulf, Indian Ocean, and Suez Canal. Russia needs to balance its ties with China and its attempts to gain sway in Africa. China has also put a lot of effort into expanding its influence across the continent under the presidency of Xi Jinping. China and Russia interact with African nations in different ways. Russia entices and keeps allies across the continent with military and diplomatic benefits. China instead entices African supporters into its camp with massive loans and economic projects. Russia's and the U.S. respective levels of influence in Africa are at odds. The current state of affairs is reminiscent of the historical fight among established and rising global powers to divide Africa, and it has the potential to start a proxy conflict among African nations. The United States' decreased engagement with Africa, particularly its 2018 decision to reduce counterterrorism efforts in the region, has also coincided with Russia's return to the continent. Moscow moved quickly to close that gap in security. President Putin hosted the first ever Russia-Africa summit in 2019 at the Black Sea retreat of Sochi to strengthen Russia's reputation as a dependable strategic partner on the continent and to secure military contract agreements with various countries, including the Nigerian government, which committed to buying Russian attack helicopters. 17 African heads of state attended the second Russia-Africa summit in July 2023, despite the war, sanctions, and pressure from the West. There, they signed various agreements with Russia on preventing an arms race in space, cooperating in information security, and fighting terrorism on the continent. Moscow also pledged to write off further debt. During this summit, Putin also promised to deliver grain to some 6 African countries. In November of last year, Russia's agriculture minister said Moscow had begun free shipments of grain totaling up to 200,000 tons to 6 African countries, as promised by President Vladimir Putin. However, we should note that Putin is not the only one supporting Traore in his quest to fight against the insecurities in his country. Burkina Faso has been making a concerted effort to deepen its diplomatic connections with other nations worldwide. In May, Burkina Faso's military leaders received a fresh consignment of military drones from Turkey. The presidency of Ouagadougou reported this in a statement, while regional press sources specify that the Burkinabe army has received at least 2 Akinji model drones and 3 TB2 model drones. Other reports state that the shipment contains about 12 combat drones of the Akinji and TB2 models, which were both created by the Turkish business Baykar Technologies, which supplies the army with aerospace and military technologies. According to Defense Minister Coulibaly, the Burkinabe military now has access to more drones than before. He claimed that numerous drones of this kind are currently flying over the country, scanning the skies for potential enemies to eliminate. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was thanked by the head of the military government for this healthy and sincere collaboration. Since 2015, Burkina Faso has seen a rise in jihadist groups connected to the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and other armed groups. Days after Burkina Faso acquired the Turkish Akinji combat drones, a video surfaced on social media showing an unmanned combat aerial vehicle detecting and striking what was being classified as terrorist targets belonging to the Islamist groups in Burkina Faso. The video's description explained that a combination of TB2 and Akinji drones were used for the operation. Both drones were purchased from the Turkish company Baykar. The threat posed by Islamist militants who have been invading Burkina Faso from neighboring Mali and Niger is growing. As drone warfare is gaining prominence worldwide, Burkina Faso has purchased state-of-the-art unmanned combat aerial vehicles to strengthen its counterterrorism efforts. The Akinji drone is expected to be deployed against terrorist and rebel targets, particularly motorcycle-riding groups of militants. So, we can see that Turkey is a strong ally to Traore. Iran is another country that has been working with Burkina Faso, though there are some doubts since they just had a new leader. In April, the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso met with the Iranian president. The president stressed the need to accelerate the establishment of mechanisms to strengthen relations between Iran and Burkina Faso, including the activation of the Joint Commission of the two countries. In this meeting, the Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, while congratulating Dr. Raisi on the successful holding of the Iran-Africa International Conference, and also condemning the terrorist act of the Zionist regime in attacking the consulate of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Damascus, described Iran and its people as the owner of a great civilization and expressed his country's interest in development of relations with the Iranian nation as the creators of this great civilization. The Prime Minister of Burkina Faso also emphasized his country's interest in expanding cooperation and interaction with the Islamic Republic of Iran in the fields of infrastructure, communications, mining, agriculture, animal husbandry, transportation, scientific and cultural knowledge, and energy. If this is to happen, then Burkina Faso will be a very powerful nation, and Traore will be remembered just as his predecessor, Thomas Sankara. Bear in mind that Sankara opposed the ongoing neo-colonialist infiltration of Africa through Western trade and finance in venues like the Organization of African Unity, and demanded that African countries form a unified front to cancel their foreign debt. He maintained that the oppressed and destitute were under no obligation to pay back the affluent and powerful. Though Traore is just beginning his journey and is also one of the youngest presidents in the world, he is already being compared to Thomas Sankara, who is one of the greatest presidents to ever rule an African country. Do you think he will be able to continue in this light and surpass the deeds of Sankara? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the New Tourist channel. Turn on notifications too so you get notified whenever we upload videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.